This is a Gracelets audio presentation from Southern California professional Christian counselor Bill Faris. You can learn more about Bill and his counseling, speaking, and writing ministry at billfaris.com or by visiting him on Facebook at Bill Faris MPC. And now here's today's Gracelets audio message.
Hi, this is Bill Faris, and I'm back with another Gracelets audio presentation. So excited today to be sharing this particular podcast with my son, Christopher Faris.
Woo!
Yes, and we've been talking about this for a while, and we're excited to be doing it. So today we're going to talk about parenting, and that's really relevant because not only am I Christopher's dad, but Christopher is himself a parent and then some. Chris, tell us about your recent parenting breakthroughs.
Well, a little over 16 months ago, my wife and I became the parents of triplets. Mm-hmm. And so I did become a parent very quickly, and here I am.
And they're all girls.
All three are girls. They're beautiful. They're healthy. And we couldn't be more thankful and just very blessed to be in this position.
But your life and your wife, Colleen, your lives have changed. Parenting has changed you.
Yes, completely.
And parenting has changed this is our first grandchildren, too. So parenting has changed your parenting has changed our whole family, and it's in exciting ways. We're really, really excited about the future with, somebody said, gosh, you have triplet grandchildren. I say, go big or go home, That's how I look at it, Might as well hit the ground running. And they are lovely and wonderful, very fun, very, very full of personality, little girls. And so let me ask you a question. It's obvious that when you become a dad to triplets, that your exterior world, your routine, your living space, your schedule, everything gets massively changed.
Stays exactly the same. Oh, yes.
Yeah. But how has your inner world changed? How have you changed on the inside since becoming a first-time father?
Well, so I would say that anyone who becomes a parent, whether it's of one child or multiples, everyone can relate to the fact that your world changes. I think if you want to do parenting well, your world has to change. And so, but with multiples, whether it's twins, triplets, or even quads, or et cetera, I think your world my world has gotten inundated, and to the sense where, I've never felt more pulled at every end for my life and for what I have to do and what it means to, be a husband now and everything. That's all changed, but so much has changed so quickly that I would say right now that I move at such a pace that it's hard to pay much attention to the interior world. And I don't mean that I'm completely neglectful of it, like I don't know what's going on there, but I used to be able to go out, and get a coffee or, go sit and just kind of think for a little while, and that would be something that I had time to do. Now when I have that time, I sit and my eyes close, I'm going to sleep, or whatever. And if I have free time, one of the things that I battle with a lot is how do I go and help Colleen, because who's my wife? Because there's kind of just a constant feeling of like if mom ain't happy, nobody happy, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just like this every kind of. Well, one of the things that's been interesting since becoming a dad to multiples is I feel like I've turned over this rock and found a whole bunch of, people who I didn't know were there. So there's all these communities, there's all these support groups, there's all this stuff there that I had no idea existed. There's parents of triplets, Facebook groups, there's moms of multiples groups, I think Saddleback Church has a group for every possible thing, but they're out there and they're everywhere. And so, for us, one of the things that's been crazy is just sort of to find all of this stuff, and sort of the universal sort of word for most parents of multiples is once you get a little bit past age 2, things start to lighten up. And once you get to age 4, it becomes much easier because, right now, you imagine how hard it is to change one diaper, but then when two little girls are grabbing your leg and going, play with me, it's really hard to makes it a little slower, or, how do you read a story? This morning we were reading and, I have video of it, but one of them is in my lap and we're reading. The other one's trying to crawl up my leg to read, and the other one's trying to grab the book out of my hands. So it's just all different.
A little chaotic.
Yeah. So my interior world is just there's all kinds of new emotions. There's all kinds of new anxieties about, wanting to make sure that I can provide, that I can take care of them. And then also provide, there's an awareness of being a provider on multiple levels.
Yeah.
So there's, of course, being a financial provider. And I think that's one thing that parents all, in the way that we see our family, and how it's set up is it's kind of traditional where Colleen has the option to stay at home. So she's staying at home and I'm working full time, and it's providing enough for us financially that we can do that. But then there's just also the emotional provision, wanting to come home, and if Colleen's had a rough day, to be able to have space to listen to that. And my job as a therapist is I listen to people all day, and so then to come home and then spend some time with the kids and be emotionally present to them and be emotionally present to my wife, and all of those things it's just a different layer of challenge where it all has to kind of get sort of put back. So I'll say this. I know this is a very long answer. Becoming a dad of multiples has totally unbalanced my world.
Okay, there you go.
Every possible way.
Well, I would think that it would probably have amplified every emotion. Like the sense of responsibility amplified, the sense of joy amplified, the sense of strain amplified, the sense of fun amplified.
Yes.
Probably every emotion just goes up to a 10.
I don't know how you felt when this happened, but I remember the first time my kids started smiling, I will do everything within my power to get them to smile because it's the greatest thing. Or I'm a very goofy person, and so I'm constantly trying to make them laugh, and I make silly noises and do funny dances and whatever I can do to get them to
I don't know where you got that from.
No idea. Yeah. Yeah.
No, there is a lot of fun in your home, and that really takes the edge off all the other. Yes. I'm sure. I know Colleen feels that way as well. But let me ask you this, looking forward, I mean, these girls are 15, 16 months old, they're just starting into life.
Well, just to be clear, all three of them are 16 months old.
Yeah. And so as you look forward, as you kind of imagine their future, what's one thing that you wish for them growing up? What would it be as you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing I obviously hope the most is that they'll follow Jesus. I really want that as the biggest thing for their life, is that they'll know Jesus, they'll know the sovereignty of God, they'll know the love of God, they'll know that that is, every bit of what informs Colleen and I's life, and I hope that, number one, that's there. But that's a given. So let me go to kind of...
Well, you say, I'm going to interrupt you, because, you say that's a given.
Yeah.
And, of course, every Christian parent would probably have that same answer.
It's funny, as I was saying it, I was like, maybe that's not quite as simple.
Yeah, because, I think one of the things that I hear that's heartbreaking and disappointing on the part of Christian parents is the feeling that somehow that hasn't happened for their children or for some of their children. And of course, that's just a big thing that they would carry, because I know that with you and your brothers and your sister, one of the things that I felt as a parent, I think your mom would agree, is that we felt like we don't want to have somebody else lead you to Christ. We don't want to have to have somebody else show you an example of what Christian adults are. We wanted to be, and by the way, over every one of your lives, we have always prayed that God would send those key influential people at those key points in your development that would take the ball and keep running with it, as far as influence. Because your mom and I never saw ourselves as the only influences in your life. We believed God needed to send, very strategic people, and He's done that for all the kids. Yeah. But nevertheless, I mean, I don't want to belabor this point, but your passion to have your girls grow up to know who they are in Christ, to know who God is, to them and to you and Colleen and to your world that you operate in, that is, I guess, your number one thing. So yeah, I would say that is not a given, but probably a passion of yours.
Certainly, yeah, and it's hard with them being the size and the age that they are to give that attention to each one of them and to think about how to give them that attention. There's just a lot to it that's really. How are we going to do this? But then I always have to go back to, I go back to this a lot actually, is when I look over the history of my life, there's fingerprints, of God all throughout it. Yeah. And I can't ignore that's who it is. And so even in my moments of biggest doubt or biggest sort of, apathy, I think that that's probably where my brain goes first is go, yeah, but remember when God did this, remember when God did that. Yeah. And I mean, gosh, even their birth, we were in the intensive care unit for about 40 days. They were born 2 weeks premature. And that's the case with multiples. A lot of people will say this. They'll say, man, with multiples, you're so lucky you got it all done in one shot. And I get the sentiment that they're saying, because it feels like that age 1 to 2 years, all of the sort of busyness of that, it lasts for 10 years for many couples, and for many parents. Sure. And that's exhausting. And for us, it's going to last for as long as, 2 to 3 years, whatever. But being a parent of multiples automatically puts you in all kinds of high-risk pregnancy categories. One of my kids had meningitis in the intensive care unit, which thank God was viral and not bacterial, and she's actually doing the best of the three of them. And the other one had a collapsed lung and major breathing issues. And so every day in the intensive care unit felt like I was walking through like the end of an Indiana Jones movie where he shows up and it's like The Last Crusade where he's walking through the labyrinth and like if you step on the switch, arrow's going to come pointing. Like you just have to walk slow, keep your head up, and
one day at a time.
Keep your head down and swing. But yeah, that's what it felt like. And so there. It was crazy, but we're still in that. Every week there's a new kind of they're delayed, and are they going to be able to catch up? And so those are all there. But I'm veering off topic a little bit. But let me go back to your original question.
Well, let me just say this, because you are touching on something that I think is universal about parenting, and that is you do run into your sense of lack of control.
Oh yeah,
you are not omnipotent. You are not omniscient. You don't know everything. You can't change everything. You can't determine everything for those little lives. And believe me, if you could, you would, right? Because you want the best for them so deeply, right? But you run into that feeling of, I'm limited here. We're limited here. Things can happen that we have no control over. And boy, does that ever draw us to the Lord, right?
Oh, yeah. I have some friends who, their daughter, who's seven years old, I think, she recently just finished chemotherapy and had all the cancer wiped out. But I couldn't imagine if my 7-year-old was in that position. That would be really scary for me. So
unbelievable,
as would be for any parent, obviously.
But even normal stuff, and we're going to talk about this in the next podcast that we're going to do today as well. But even the normal stuff, like just the influence of culture and the influence of friends and the influences that come in and and vie for the attention and the hearts of your children, and like, oh my gosh, I can't just put them in a bubble. We'll get more into that later, but you do run into that feeling of needing to trust that something bigger. Someone bigger is really at work here.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's, again, the looking back on the faithfulness of God. And I go to Job's words all the time, when he says, you give me stuff and you take it away, but I'm worshiping you the same regardless. My worship of you is not dependent on whether you give me something or bless me. My worship as you is dependent upon you and your character. And so, that to me is a really important sort of thing to hold in the middle of all this.
Well, let me switch gears just a little bit here.
Well, I'd love to answer this question if you don't mind.
Oh, did I? Okay, go ahead.
So outside of what I wanted to follow Jesus, I'll say this, and I think that I would imagine that most parents feel this way, is at this point in 2016, we're a week off of hearing about a major leader, braggadociously, talking about how he can get any woman he wants, and he'll force himself on them to do it, and what the result of that has been, and I'm not making a political statement, but what the result of that has been in my personal life is many women who I know have been sort of being more open about, this is what it's like when I ride on a train. This is what it's like when I've had men stalk me. I've, had men grope me. I've had, all this stuff. And I work with clients and victims of sexual assault. And there is not anything that can, it's hard for me to think of maybe the more difficult wounding and more painful wounding than sexual assault, and more than physical violence, more than emotional violence.
Wounding to the soul.
There's something about when someone is wounded in their sexuality that is brutal. And probably my biggest thing as a parent is my daughter's safety. I know that I don't have the ability to protect everything, but this is probably where I'll become the most neurotic is, who are you with and how long are you going to be with them? And, and just and then just wanting to make sure that they're okay, especially with a wound like that. And to anyone who's been through that kind of a wounding, gosh, my heart's just breaking for you. And the treatment for it has been, I've been learning all kinds of new things about in the past year, have been really encouraging, but it's still, that's probably my biggest thing is that my daughter, all three of my daughters are safe, and, that they don't make foolish decisions. And especially with, seeing pop culture toss us like a volleyball back and forth, and one side saying, it's just locker room talk and blah, blah, blah. And the other side, Well,
listen, here we are. We're talking a couple of generations here, because when you were growing up and your brothers and your sister, your mom and I had plenty of things that we were aware of, that we were trying to sort of screen and keep at bay and keep your innocence intact and do the best we could. But my gosh, the influences now and the media by which the numbers of ways that children's hearts and minds can be reached that are just, many, many more ways than when you were growing up, even just a generation ago. This is where, I think, wow, parents of your generation have an even more substantial task than your mother and I had.
Which is what your parents said.
Well, I'm sure it was. Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's, hopefully there's going to be a lot of wisdom in, being sort of applied, creatively and well. But yeah, it's interesting to see what those challenges are, and it's interesting to kind of think about what those challenges are going to be for us. But
you're doing something, I think, proactively that I think is important to underline here, and that is you and Colleen are very, very, very invested in your parenting, and you're very connected to them. You're making lots of bonds. You're spending lots of time. You're creating lots of connections and lots of security and lots of warmth in your home and in your relationship with them. That is the sort of the immunization, I think, against so many of these things. You can't just be on the defensive all the time. A lot of this battle is won by being proactive and by setting up a positive sort of a flagpole around which, a heart can rally. This is what it feels like to feel good, to feel loved, to feel secure. I don't want to get away from that. I don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think that you guys also have done something that as parents of multiples, I think is especially wonderful, which is you are very committed to making time for yourselves as a couple.
Yeah.
And, we all know that parenting changes that dynamic. Your life gets sort of swallowed up, right, by all the other stuff. But you and Colleen, you're very good about dating still, about trying to take time, about getting away from time to time, even at this age. You've enrolled friends and family, and, you're not afraid to reach out and say, help, because we need time for us. And I think that is so huge. And that also is something, you're really doing that for your girls, not just for you and Colleen, but you're really doing it for them. You're modeling for them, something very important.
Yeah. So every week since they were born, we've, you guys live close. Colleen's parents live close, and I call her Saint Beth. But
you have a lot of saint friends who have stepped up.
No kidding. Yeah, and she comes over every Sunday night, often with Colleen's parents, and even if it's just when the girls go to bed, we every Sunday night, except for I think 1 or 2 nights since they were born, have gone on a date, even with multiples. And Beth she doesn't charge us. She just comes over and does it out of like the kindness of her heart. And
her phone number is 949.
No, I'm keeping that close to my heart. No, but she's I think I credit the sanity that we have a lot to Beth and Dean and Mary and you guys, because our support system has had to sort of step in and be a part of this, or else we would drown. Every Monday and Tuesday, my daughters have physical therapy and occupational therapy and all kinds of stuff. And so Colleen will stay with her parents for 2 days. They're at retirement age, so they're home. One's working part-time, and so she's planned her schedule perfectly. We have that, and it's so life-giving to us and life-saving for us that we're at the point where, like, when our kids get old enough, we will be Saint Beth to someone else.
Well, they say it takes a village to raise a child, but I think you're not raising. It takes a village to raise a village. You have a village. You don't just have a kid. You have a whole village.
In our case, it takes it takes a nation to raise.
It takes a nation to raise your village.
So, but I'll say though that even when Beth has been gone or we haven't had someone there, we're like, we'll pay for whatever. Even if, and I tell to couples I work with all the time that just have 2 or 3 kids and they're all under 10 years old. Even if you don't get to go out and spend money on a meal or something like that, just you need an hour to connect. And probably the biggest area that I see couples really losing it over is that sort of especially when kids, the Gottmans talk about this a lot, and John and Julie Gottman are sort of these preeminent researchers on marriage. If you want to know anything statistically about marriage that has been verified and is reputable and good, look up John and Julie Gottman. Mm-hmm. But they're affirming that kids are a grenade to a marriage, it's not to say that it's impossible, but just talking a moment ago about how everything changes, you have to fight for your marriage. But I'll say too that a lot of parents will come in saying, I want my kids to behave better or with their temper or whatever. Yeah. And then I'll look at how the sometimes families will treat each other, and I'm just looking at the top, and I don't just mean clients, I mean just anybody. Yeah. And kind of going, do you not see what you're modeling? And I think some of that is I have to be cognizant and aware of how I go just spend time with Colleen and sit with her and hang out with her, and we just take time to talk and connect. And one of my big things is I've been trying to put my cell phone in the car when we go out and not take it with me, and just kind of having to cut that cord. It's
hard. Yeah. We're coming up on the end of our time here, but I want to ask you one last question in this segment, and that is, hey, what is one of the most rewarding things about being a dad so far, besides having me for a dad?
Well, truly, you're a great dad. You are. You're a great example, and I'm very, very thankful to God for that.
Well, thank you. But okay. I appreciate that, and I say that because I've tried to be, and I'm glad to hear that you feel that way.
Absolutely.
And if your brothers or your sisters say anything different, I want to know that. I want to know, and I want to get them. So, yeah. But seriously, for yourself though, as a new dad, even though there's a lot of road ahead of you as a dad, but your life has already been changed by being a father. But so far, what's rewarding about it?
My blessed sacred wife. She. I work a lot in the evenings and late afternoons, and so she affords me the ability to sleep in. Mm-hmm. So I'll get out of bed, and I'll hear, said village of little children eating breakfast, and I'll walk out there, and as soon as I do, all three of them go, "Ee, ee, ee," and they all squeak, and it's like it's stuff like that. Like I just or like having my daughter take her first steps and walk down the hallway, or when they recognize you and they smile, and they're excited to see you, and you know that there's a bond and a connection happening.
You cannot buy that with money.
No,
you cannot buy that with any amount of money.
I remember the first time that they smiled, and I just. I don't remember if we said this on the mic or off the mic, but I'm going to repeat it again because we were talking about this earlier. I just remember the first time I started smiling, and like I will do everything within my power to get them to smile and to laugh and all of that, and just because it's the greatest sound that it's the greatest sound in the world. There's this woman, her name's Shara Warden, and she has a band moniker she goes by called My Brightest Diamond. And she has this song that you can watch on YouTube. She's playing it live. She starts crying at the end.
Wow.
But it's about her she was when she first became a mom, and it's called I Have Never Loved Someone, or something like that. And there's a line in it that's like, and when you laugh, I know heaven's key. And I'm just like,
yeah, nails it. Nails it.
You couldn't.
Yeah.
I'm tearing up thinking about it. You couldn't say anything more perfect than that. Beautiful song. Everyone should look it up.
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah.
We're going to have to do more of these. In fact, we're going to do another one right away, which will be available shortly after this one comes out, this podcast comes out. But there's a couple of things I want to touch base with in terms of contacting you, because you are a Christian therapist.
Yes.
And you do practice in Costa Mesa, California. You are taking new clients.
Yes.
I'm sure if you're out there, if you're a young parent or in a marriage that is perhaps new to you, or a stage in life where you feel like Chris would be someone you would really relate to well and would be a good person to talk to about parenting, about marriage, about anything like that, how do people get a hold of you?
So best way to get a hold of me is through my website, which is ChristopherFarisCounseling.com.
And Faris is spelled F-A-R-1-R-I-S.
That's right, like Paris, but with an F. Paris, France, not California. ChristopherFarisCounseling.com, and that's got all my information on it. I would love to get the chance to meet with you.
Very good. And this has been another Gracelets audio presentation. We're glad you were able to join us for this, and keep listening.
This has been a Gracelets audio presentation from Bill Faris, MPC. For more brief and full-length audio messages from Bill, visit his page at Spreaker.com. And don't forget to share your comments with Bill by writing him at billferris@billferris.com. Thanks for listening.